Boa tarde a todos e todas. Hoje, nosso entrevistado vai ser Luiz Monroe. Ele é doutor em Política e Estudos Internacionais pela Universidade de Birmingham, assim como eu. Ele vai falar um pouquinho mais sobre resolução de conflito. A entrevista vai ser em inglês. E eu gostaria de convidar vocês a curtir, né, e conhecer um pouco mais o trabalho dele nesse Instagram aqui, relatosignorados.puj, que é o Instagram que os alunos do Luiz fazem e coordenam e mantêm vivo. Tá? Então, acessem esse Instagram e, claro, por favor, curtam também o vídeo, compartilhem, divulguem um pouco, porque vocês vão ajudar muito. Lembre-se, conhecimento não pode ficar parado, tem que circular. Então, ajudem a gente nisso, tá bom? Uma boa entrevista. Hello, everybody. We're going to start an interview today. And our guest today is Luis Monroe. He's an assistant professor of international relations at Universidad Javeriana in Bogota, Colombia. He has a PhD from the University of Birmingham, where I first met him. We were PhD candidates together in Birmingham, and actually we worked together. We were side by side in our first class in the UK, in this university in the UK. So he's Colombian, okay? But this interview, as you very well must notice, is going to be in English because my Spanish, honestly, is rubbish. So I won't speak Spanish with you, but I can speak English, okay? So Luis, thank you for being here with us. And it's a pleasure to talk to you and to see you, even though virtually, okay? You are missed, my friend.
It is a pleasure on my side as well, Ruben. Thank you so much.
Okay, so let's start with a simple question, okay? It's about your work. You're a specialist of conflict resolution. So many students of IR students, Brazilian IR students, they are not familiar to this concept of conflict resolution. Can you explain a little bit more about what does conflict resolution mean?
Sure. Conflict resolution is a field or a sub-area of international relations that, as its name says, it focuses on understanding conflict, understanding how to analyze it, how to theorize about it, and how to create either policies, practices, or skills that can help either finish conflict or transform, change conflict from a negative, violent situation to a more positive one.
Right, so just to ask something, how can IR students or defense students work in conflict resolutions? So what are the options and where they can engage and how they can engage with this topic and work field?
Sure. Due to the complexity of conflicts in the 21st century, it is a very vital and important skill for people to understand how to analyze situation of tension, analyze opportunities for mediating, for negotiating, for establishing communication between parties in conflict. So anyone who has an appreciation of how to analyze conflict and how to develop practical skills to help its resolution is a very, very good candidate for organizations that have to deal with defense situations, security situations, humanitarian situations, relief, development aid, because all of these different areas have understood that they need to connect, that they need to relate their knowledge from one side to the other. So in this sense, experts in peace studies, conflict analysis, conflict transformation are very useful at any setting because they have the analytical skills to understand what causes a conflict, what causes violence, which is not exactly the same thing, and how do you address these situations in order to effectively solve what is happening on the ground or what's happening in reality and move forward. So I think that is a vital skill in any different area, whether it's private or public, whether it's a political, an economic, or a social conflict. It's really valued in different work settings, including, of course, the areas of security and particularly in the discipline of international relations.
Yeah, but let's imagine that I'm a student okay, of international relations, or I don't know, political science, sociology, or whatsoever. And today I've decided that I want to work in conflict resolution. Okay, what should I look for? Where should I go? What are the opportunities and everything?
Yeah, there are different areas, particularly think tanks or non-governmental organizations, for instance, that on the ground are in deep necessity of people with mediation skills, with communication skills, and with the analytical skills that come with studying conflict resolution. I personally have engaged with a wide array of NGOs here in Colombia, in Bosnia and the United Kingdom, organizations like Responding to Conflict, an organization in the UK that was fostering mediation in different areas of the world, in places like Syria, Afghanistan, and Iraq. And they kind of were teaching workshops on how to effectively communicate, how to analyze conflicts, how to use different tools to get people to think and solve conflicts together. In Bosnia, for instance, I've seen a lot of organizations that deal with young people and teach them mediation skills in high schools, at university, in the workplace, in order to avoid the type of interethnic tensions that they have over there. Here in Colombia, there's also a range of organizations that all are seeking to identify the root causes of very, very localized conflicts and train people to effectively avoid violence and effectively use the skills to identify what are the root causes of their conflicts, what leads to violence, and address them as quickly as possible. So the NGO sector needs a lot of this. Universities are very keen because it opens a connection between academia and sort of the practical world. So for instance, my job here at Javeriana University entails discussing with academics, but also talking to victims of conflict in order to help repair some of the damage that the Colombian violence, the Colombian war has imposed upon them. So it's highly valued also at universities. And of course, you can talk about the big players, international organizations, all the humanitarian aid organizations, the United Nations, all the world-renowned international NGOs. They all are interested in candidates with these types of skills.
Nice. So you had now you're working in Colombia, your home country. But you had your sweet time working in Bosnia, right? So can you tell us a little bit about your experience, both in Bosnia and in Colombia? The work you did, that your experience, the mistakes you must avoid, and I don't know, anything that must be useful for people that want to work in conflict resolution.
No, I've been really lucky to work in different settings. In Bosnia has a lot of challenges despite being a very small country with a very devastating war. So for instance, projects on reconciliation and getting people to talk together again after war because of the animosities, because of the divisions between ethnic and religious lines. A lot of organizations are keen on getting, they say getting old friends that are now enemies to talk together. It's very important. So using cinema, using mediation skills, using youth projects to get young people together are very common over there. There are plenty of organizations. I had the chance to work with people like the Nansen Dialogue Center. They're very famous in Europe as they promote sort of peace advocates in schools and in universities so that they themselves can train people into conflict resolution skills. I've worked with an organization called Post-Conflict Research Center. They're very, very good at using multimedia tools, the internet, and very, very modern social media techniques to advocate for transitional justice, to advocate for reparations for victims of the war, to tell truths that are not often being told because of political reasons about the Bosnian War and its violence. And many other different organizations that all do their thing to promote things like advocacy for truth commissions, sponsoring justice that caters for victims of the war, reconciliation projects, and other types of things. Over here in Colombia, we do the same, of course, not along ethnic or religious lines, but more along the lines of our conflict, how to get people to meet demobilized fighters from the guerrilla groups that we have or from paramilitaries, how to help victims express things that have happened after 70 years of war, to heal their trauma, and to deal with some of the injustices that the war has imposed upon them. So we hear things like memory projects, people trying to get closer to the institutions of transitional justice, trying to get reparations, or trying to get their cases heard in terms of the justice institutions in the country. There's a lot of work being done on that area, sort of peace building and conflict resolution tied together. Things that I have learned and mistakes that I've made in the past, I would say really understand why you're doing this. There are a lot of people that get into this field with a lot of ideas, a lot of initiatives, and then, because they end up in the wrong organization or they face some sort of corruption, they end up being very deflated. So you really have to understand who you're working with, where you're working at, because bad experiences can really damage, your energy, your good intentions, the change you want to see in the world. And it's really sad. I've seen a lot of students of mine not doing sort of their research carefully on where they're going and what they're doing, and they end up disheartened by the whole process. And it's really sad to hear someone that doesn't want to engage again in peace building because he or she has had a very, very bad experience. So really be careful, really read your organization, understand what they do, do your research before you either intern or work for one of these types of NGOs.
So is that your main advice for them today? If someone wants to work with conflict resolutions, really to pay attention where you're working with and where you're going to well, I don't know, make your network. So is that the main advice you should give to someone that wants to work in conflict resolution today?
Yeah, I think you said the key word, Rubens. Networking is very vital, as it is in any other area of work. But with peace building and conflict resolution, there's plenty of groups, on social media, on Facebook, Instagram, you can follow a lot of organizations. There's a lot of sort of exchanges between the global north and the global south, and between countries of the global south in this field. So there's a lot of opportunities, but you really have to really know the conflict that you're getting into, or really know the context that you're getting into, to really be aware of the possibilities of what you can do and avoid harm in that area, harm to others and harm to yourself. I think that would be the safest bit of advice, because sadly, as I said, I've seen people, go with a lot of enthusiasm to other countries and go like, yeah, I'm going to change this reality. And, they're very positive. And then they find out that harsh realities can actually traumatize them, or it can actually affect their dreams, their goals. And then, it's really difficult to deal with. So really, really do your research, understand an area where you're going, even in your own country, so that, you're really prepared to engage with things that might be quite complex. And that's what conflict resolution gives you, the tools to address complexity.
I think I've never told you that, because, well, never came up, honestly. But one of my first jobs when I was still undergrad student was to work in an NGO. It wasn't a proper conflict resolution, but working on an NGO that was supporting societies and groups to go to the International Court of Justice, okay, and try to get some kind of satisfaction or reparation or something. I stayed there for only 1 month, because it was really disappointing. It's not about corruption of where I was working, okay, but we went to the court, and it was, in that particular case, it was a case against Paraguay. Okay, and Paraguay got convicted, and then the person that was there representing Paraguay during the sentence, the judge was reading the sentence, and during that time they just stand up and left.
Mhm.
And I said, wow, okay, what's happening here? Because that's so disrespectful, right? So what's going to happen? No, now we are going to the OAS, and they are going to read something against Paraguay, and they will tell you, bad boy, don't do that, never again. I said, okay, and no, and that's it, is everything that we can do. That was so disappointing for me. Okay.
I, I I hear you. I think in my field, when you deal with, I mean, you're talking about sort of this big cases between countries, but for example, in the case of Bosnia, when you have war criminals that have shot people, that have, committed atrocities, genocide, the stakes are much higher, the pain is much higher, and you have sort of similar results. Some people that, were not processed, or some people that didn't even go to court, people that are protected by governments because of, political favors, and you see the victims and you're like, yeah, but that person, did this and that to my family, to my friend, my boyfriend, my husband, etc., etc. And you're gonna get a sense of unfairness in this field, and you really have to kind of separate your mind between real politics and that side of things, what you were describing, the geopolitical, the big areas, and what you can do locally. And if you can work locally with a person and just be like, look, let's figure out how to make your life a little bit better. Let's talk about, what empowerment is for you. And empowerment might not be putting the big bad wolf in the jail cell, because you're not going to get a lot out of it. But maybe if we can figure out other ways where from your everyday life you can transform this pain that you have, this trauma, into something positive, then I think that makes a difference. Sure, it's not solving the world wars of the 21st century. It's not solving those big dilemmas. But if this, the ability of conflict resolution to give you skills to help people in what seems to be very tiny but meaningful processes, I think that's much and equally and more important than coming up with the solution to world peace, which I don't think anybody has.
I couldn't agree more with you. It's about helping people. So yeah, doing good, helping people, even though it's not like in a huge scale. If you're helping one person, one family to get better, to get in a better situation, it's already something that you must go for it. Honestly, everybody, don't be people that are watching us, don't be innocent. We had a talk previous to the interview, and we set some questions. We were talking about which questions I was going to ask Luis. But now I do have one surprise question, if I may, Luis. Okay?
Shoot.
Okay, I'm not going to ask you about the situation in Colombia, because that would be a lecture by itself. But yeah, it's a lot of history there, a lot of history there. I can understand that. But I can ask you, what is Brazil doing? What can Brazil do to help conflict resolution in Colombia?
I think Brazil has been an interesting partner. It's a country that we've historically called sort of a friendly neighbor when it comes to mediating things like our relationship with Venezuela, or dealing with the issues of how to deal with migrants right now. It used to be an ally that kind of opened up good practices and would have given us opportunities together with other countries in the region. But unfortunately, because of the sort of political veering in Brazil in the last years, it has been much more difficult to talk about humanitarian issues, and we seem to be talking only about Venezuela and how to topple Maduro. So I think that the shift has changed and it's getting more difficult. But there has always been a good spirit between Brazil and Colombia to help with humanitarian issues, to understand one another, and to kind of promote a better dialogue. We just need to kind of go back to an agenda that talks about sort of humanitarian issues, relief, aid, support, diplomacy, rather than this sort of very geopolitical interest with Venezuela.
Right. So is there any NGO or Brazilian think tank in Colombia right now? Or it's just a matter of state level?
I think there is clearly state cooperation. I think you can find a lot of local efforts around the Amazon region, especially because we're talking about climate change creating conflicts, and because we share that region together, it makes sense, and it creates an opportunity for cooperation at the local level, at the grassroots, rather than the big institutional political government kind of cooperation. So there's a lot of spaces, and you would have to look deep into what is happening in the Amazon and discussions about like indigenous tribes, and unfortunately drug trafficking that goes through there, smuggling. It creates a lot of, it's a problem, but it creates opportunities for organizations to get together and try to find common solutions.
Indeed. So, Luis, thank you very much for your time, for being here with us. And I hope to see you in person soon, because you're just next. Yeah, you're just next to me. So you're just here in Colombia, right? We went across the Atlantic. So I hope we can meet each other very soon and drink some caipirinhas or whatever.
Oh, aguardiente, yeah, for sure. We got to do that, Rubens. Thank you so much for having me, and it's great to be a part of this project of yours. I really, really appreciate it.